The text of the story, based on the provided subtitles, looks like this. Rest and unforgettable impressions. I remember living in a friend's basement when I was in the 4th grade. There were 4 of us, and around midnight the owner of the house came to ask if we wanted to have a snack. But as soon as he started talking, he fell down the stairs and hit his head pretty hard. He didn't move for what seemed like an eternity, and we heard a desperate scream from the top of the stairs. I thought it was the owner's mom who was scared because her husband tripped and fell. But later we found out that the presenter's mom was drunk and pushed Dad down the stairs. So, I think I witnessed a wife trying to kill her husband. Then the drunk mom called my parents the next evening and kept calling for over 1 hour. Judging by my parents' reaction, I thought I was in trouble for some reason. Looking back, they were probably just wondering if I would ever let them sleep in that house again. No legal action was taken, and Dad was a great guy who didn't bring any charges. He had just left the family and filed for divorce about a year or 2 after it happened. Sleepwalking and disturbing moments. I was at a friend's sleepover party, and about 10 of us gathered in the living room. Me and another girl were the last ones to watch some random TV shows. One of the girls was sitting up straight, and the light from the TV reflected off her face. Her eyes were glazed, and she didn't react to our words. Then she got up and we obviously chased her. At this point, we assumed that she was sleepwalking. She went into the kitchen, opened one of the cupboards, took off her pajamas, leaned her hips forward and began to urinate. We stood there in shock and hysteria, and of course none of us wanted to touch it. So we just closed the door. The next day, we couldn't get her to believe us. Obviously, she had never walked in her sleep before. Disturbing encounters. One of my friends went to visit his girlfriend on a double date. They were watching Point Break and decided to have a bite of coquito, while the owner of the place was eating absently. Not realizing that there was no one else, he ate a whole portion for himself. They all went to bed, and the owner went up to his room. In the middle of the night, a strange sound was heard from the 2nd floor, and everyone went to investigate, including the girl who really liked the owner. The owner was completely naked in his room, asked for help, and vomited violently and uncontrollably when the coquito fermented and grew in his stomach. They had to call an ambulance, and I think they wouldn't have met after that.
Unpleasant moments.
When I was 10 years old, I spent the night at a friend's house and at one point played Nintendo. He shouted something, and without saying a word, his father burst into the room, picked him up and started spanking him right in front of my eyes. Then he took him out into the hallway to scold him. Then he returned as if nothing had happened, but with a red face and tear-stained eyes. It was the most awkward night of my life, and after that I had to keep pretending that I had a pleasant sleepover. But I felt so sorry for him, and I tried my best. This is exactly how I imagined what it would be like to spend the night at Maslenitsa. More disturbing stories. I always have another sleepover story that doesn't get out of my head. We watched Aladdin at a birthday party, and I remembered the scene when Jasmine looked at her old friend late at night, who was shuddering noisily in his sleeping bag in the movie, the 2nd story. My friend's brother was angry at her for little things. He enters his room, loses the TV remote control, closes the door too loudly, beats her half to death, pulls her hair, pushes and literally throws her to the other side of the room. He was almost 10 years older than us and weighed 100 to 150 pounds more than her. Eventually he got tired of the beating and left the room, and she went back to playing with me as if nothing had happened. I remember being incredibly shocked by this, but eventually I realized how normal it seemed to her and how much she liked it. More disturbing encounters. I was in the 4th grade when I spent the night at a friend's house. It was me and 2 other girls. It was my first time sleeping in someone else's house. I was always too scared to stay the night somewhere, but she and I were nearby, and when I hung out at her house during the day, we always ate popcorn, not sure if it was delicious, so I spilled a few grains on my shirt. We all laughed, ran to the toilet and pulled out the crumbs. A few pieces ended up in the sink. When her older brother, a high school student, found out about this, he began to beat her severely. The other girl and I ran into her room and closed the door. All we heard was her screams. I felt so guilty. At last she came into the room, flushed and in tears. We never talked about it again, and I didn't have another sleepover until after graduation. An anxious family life. At my friend's birthday party, he put us to sleep in his tent in the backyard. One of my friends said, "We're all guys." At that time, I couldn't even act like a boxer with my friends because I was too shy. No, I was undressing. Well, the birthday boy agrees, and after he saw the body parts of other normal-sized boys, he saw a macro penis. Yes, he cried, but he never really worried, but I was scared. Disturbing nightmares. One night I spent the night at a friend's house. I woke up in the middle of the night because I felt sick. But my friend was not in bed, and both alarm clocks were broken and showed a random time, for example, 1:38 a.m. or something like that. I was convinced that time had stopped and everyone had disappeared. I remember crying and being too scared to go downstairs and check the clock on the microwave. Eventually, I went into his parents' room and woke them up. My friend also slept in his parents' bed. Errol. Disturbing family secrets. When I was in elementary school, my sister and I were invited to a friend's birthday party. Everything was going well for most of the evening, and then disaster struck. Her mom went down to the basement and was obviously very upset, but she didn't explain why. Then she lined each of us up on the stairs leading from the basement to the first floor of the house and took us out in turn. I wasn't in the front row, but no one told us what happened when their turn came. Finally, I got up, and her mom took me to the bathroom and showed me the trash can with poop. She was on the verge of tears, pointed to the trash can and asked me. It wasn't like that I didn't know who it was, or at least they didn't tell me. We joke that someone will eventually confess on their deathbed, but since then my sister and I have lost touch with these girls. Disturbing experiences. This is my favorite song, haha. One day I was visiting a friend for a sleepover, and he and another friend hugged me on the couch and tried to set my hair on fire with a lighter. I managed to get free. I ran upstairs and asked my friend's mom to make a phone call. Mom came to pick me up immediately. Needless to say, I didn't want to talk to the other two again. An alarming family situation. The parents of one of the children paid a policeman they knew to fake the arrest of a child and pretend that my parents were making accusations. God, we need more explanations about this. I remember my mom talking to the baby's mother. She said, "We returned to the story about the police officers, which was quoted above. When the phrase "you spoke backwards" hung in the air, I assume it means that the police officer came specifically to scare him." Disturbing nightmares. I was 13 to 14 years old, and I stayed the night at a friend's with 2 other girls when we were woken up by a loud bang coming from her brother's room. Naturally, 4 curious girls went to see what he was doing at 3 a.m. By the time we entered his room, her mom ran up the stairs and immediately threw us out of his room in hysterics. It took my brain forever to realize that he had shot himself in the chest. Fortunately, he survived, and I never had sleepovers in other people's houses again. but there are plenty of nightmares. Disturbing family secrets. When I was in the first grade, my mom got a second job to work on Friday and Saturday evenings. I'm going to live at my best friend's house. It lasted about 2 weeks until I told her about all the strange things that had happened. First of all, my best friend was very thin. She was very underweight. But her mother told everyone that it was because of her illness. Her mom literally counted the grapes we ate. She was on a very strict diet, and I, plump, was hungry. There is no sugar, bread or pasta in it. My mom was starving. Secondly, her dad took a picture of us. One day he called me to the office, where he had a picture of me in a bikini, with my plump belly and legs. He photoshopped my body and made me very slim. He told me how good I would look if I went on a diet. He also asked me to sit on his lap and play computer games, even though his daughter, my best friend, was forbidden to be in the office and she was taking a bath. I ran away and knocked on the bathroom door. Thirdly, her brother was allowed to do whatever he wanted. We could only watch PBS, but he controlled the TV in the living room and turned on what he wanted. We were not allowed into the room if he decided to watch TV. He could also beat us with impunity. He was about 4 years old. Mom bathed her because she couldn't clean herself up on her own. She also had to wear clothes that her mother chose. It was always very cramped and too small. Last night, the second strange thing happened during my entire stay there. My mom rejected her and called them EHPs. She told me when I was an adult. My best friend has changed several private Christian schools. When I saw her one day in high school, she hated me, and she was about 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed about 99 pounds. I would be surprised if it was ever 3-digit. Disturbing family dynamics. When I was in 6th grade, I was going to spend the night with a friend, but we ended up staying with another guy who lives down the street. In the end, this guy talked about how he would lie on the bed until there was a wet spot on his boxers. In the end, he did it when we were in the room watching TV and showed us a wet spot. That's how I learned to jerk off. The same thing. I was so embarrassed when I saw a wet spot on my bed after that. I even ran to my parents to ask why my urine was sticky. Haha. A disturbing experience of rapprochement. We remember how, in our first year of high school, you united us by sending us to summer camp for the entire school year and for weekends. Approximately 211 to 12 years old. To get to know everyone better, the sleeping places were distributed in dormitories with bunk beds divided by gender, and there were about 30 people in the room. Right as in my dorm, unattended, with only 30 people aged 11 to 12 who don't know each other well. The children are farting merrily. Someone else farted, and a few more people. Then I distinctly remember a distinct squelching sound and the panic that followed. The child shot himself. I would also like to point out that this was not the only public use of pants, expletive, by this child. Last year, he did it again during the Edinburgh Night Award ceremony at the camp. I lived in the same tent with him. This is a completely different story. Disturbing family secrets. We were playing hide and seek with a friend's sister, and while we were talking out loud, I went into the unlocked bathroom. There was a horse here. My sister was 5 and we were 10 years old. The father was spitting out his expletive, while looking at himself in the bathroom mirror, and with his other hand he was tugging at his nipple. I left and walked home. Disturbing family events. A child who had a gallon bottle of marinade in his closet. If he needed to pee in the middle of the night, he used a bottle. We weren't allowed to leave his room until Mom came to pick us up the next morning. How did they confirm this? The door handle was turned back so we could lock ourselves inside. God, expletive, A. My mailbox was emptied and cleaned in the morning. Well, the jar is for emergency use only, and if he used it. Most children at this age can hold it in their hands all night, so they probably rarely use it. He was a bad kid and got into trouble all the time. I'm sure the lock was needed to send him to his room and make sure he stays there. I'm not aware of the parent's sexual habits, but I'm not surprised that most Reddit users reacted immediately to the drug-fueled dodgers. What will you do if there is a fire? That's what a gallon of pie was. Disturbing family secrets. When I was about 13 to 14 years old, the guy I invited to my birthday sleepover decided to strip naked in front of a cake and ice cream. My parents, friends and relatives were humiliated. Apparently, this was normal behavior in his house. Maybe he didn't want to stain his clothes with cake and ice cream. It's a good idea for toddlers who don't eat well, but at the age of 14, yes. I really hope that my daughter will grow up and stop eating spaghetti without a shirt. I'm 33 years old, but I'm not. Disturbing dynamics in the family. When I was 12 years old, the whole family went to Las Vegas. I woke up in the hotel when my parents were having sex on the next bed. I was trapped and couldn't go anywhere. My mom said, "Stop it, we'll wake the kids up." My father got up, walked over to our bed and tore the blanket off our faces. A quick Anna, look, Lippy must have won an Oscar. Reddit, this obviously confused me. After this trip, I was just waiting for my parents. They told me something like go to bed soon. And I also categorically answered, "Je know." They fell asleep, and I won, looking back, as a child and as an adult. I'm worried about all future family trips. It would be better if your eyes were wide open and looked blank. I have a feeling that such a person just looked me straight in the eye and repeated, "He's sleeping soundly." Apostrophe. Oscar is here. Disturbing family secrets. A friend had a dad who had an aquarium with piranhas. I really wanted them to eat hot dogs, but her dad told me that they had already eaten overnight. I sneaked into the place where the aquarium was located and selected clean fish bones from the aquarium. Dad was watching football there and found me. He asked if I still wanted to feed the piranhas. Being a little kid obsessed with piranhas, I nodded and took out the hot dog that saved us from a barbecue dinner. It was the scariest and most amazing thing I've ever seen. 10.10.1 I will never again want 3 piranhas to get into hot dogs, at least directly. Actually, it's pretty cool and useful. Oh yes, I've refreshed myself here. I'm glad Dad took it easy after he caught the piranha. Haha. Many dads are still adult children. He knows that piranha is cool. He wants to see them devour hot dogs the same way the kids do. An anxious family life. I spent the night at a friend's house when I was about 9 or 10 years old. I knew his mom was pretty strict, but a saint, expletive, as far as I understood. He'd do very minor things, like leave socks in the living room, and she'd start yelling at him like he'd left shit on the floor or something. Then he pissed her off again that night, and she cried so hard for him that it scared me. She was so furious that she slapped him and screamed at him. After that night, I hated her to the core. Edit. I have no idea what this guy has become. We quickly separated, and searching for his family name on Google is like searching for John Smith. In addition, another man with the same name was killed in the same city. It's buried pretty deep because it wasn't him. Disturbing family secrets. He had such friends. I went to his house and accidentally walked into a nice living room, and he was scared. I thought it was very strange, but he turned on the vacuum cleaner to remove my footprints from the carpet in the living room. It was in the mountains, and it wasn't mud or anything like that, but it meant I could see where I was going. For a moment I thought it was funny, but actually it surprised me because he was so afraid of his mom. They also had to sit in the bathtub and take a shower to avoid splashing water everywhere. Crazy people are generally very sad to have children. It's a really shitty way to grow up. I hope he's safe. Yes, controlling parents generate a lot of resentment, especially when you reach the stage where you start thinking for yourself, want privacy, and question what you've been told throughout your life. It doesn't happen that parents are emotionally unreliable and always afraid of something. Disturbing encounters. The child was climbing over a crossbar in the backyard, slipped, fell, hit his jaw and bit his tongue. We come from the land of ice and snow. Dad's mistress has arrived. Obviously, the mother knew about her existence, and this complicated the situation. My friend and I hid in the basement, while my wife and mistress were yelling at each other upstairs. Surprisingly, this did not lead to a divorce. Disturbing family secrets. I was living at my friend's house when his father showed up. His parents have separated, but the divorce has not yet taken place. Obviously, Mom had a new boyfriend, and Dad had somehow lost his guard. I still remember him banging on the front door and screaming, while his mom and boyfriend were screaming together. In the end, a policeman came and took my father away, so that he would not violate public order or something like that. The same thing, we heard all this and ran down to the basement, and then his mom came down and acted like nothing had happened, just wanted to go home. An unpleasant discovery. I found a pillow for my friend's brother's body. He was clearly doing dirty things with her. The pillow on his body stands by itself. His body pillow has a life of its own, or the lives of millions of little creatures. Anyway, it wasn't the night. It was the next morning. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I was visiting a friend in a big city. I went to the bathroom for number 1 and came out. There is nothing strange about this. My friend follows me in and returns about 10 minutes later. His mom loses her temper and shouts at me. At first I don't understand what's going on, but she points me to the bathroom, where there's a big puddle of urine on the floor. He told her that I did it, and she said that I wiped the urine after her son. It goes without saying that I didn't communicate with my friends back then. It was a disgusting breakfast. Wow, this reminds me of my friend from the 3rd grade. In short, I write him an email expressing my disappointment that he ignored me during the break instead of going to chat with his new girlfriend, and I let him know that I'm fine with this girl, and we could all hang out together. He rewrote my letter and took it to the teacher, adding a lot of swearing and threats to it. The teacher called a meeting with my mother, but they really believed me when I said I didn't write the letter because the handwriting was completely wrong. I immediately left that school and never saw this guy again, but to this day, it is the most expletive word that a person has ever used in relation to me. LOL.